All right, everyone, welcome back to a Shot of E&J podcast. Now we're going to go into our podcast session topic for today. We're going to talk about, give an update and talk about Atatiana Jefferson, and we're going to go into talking about, the other past police killings, and then the case and next steps as far as police reform overall nationwide. And so the one thing we want to talk about, since we both live in Fort Worth, Atatiana Jefferson case was a huge national case, right? Years ago, right? And Jeremy, you want to provide some history and context into that, and we can go dive into it. But
right. So Atatiana Jefferson, she was murdered October 12, 2019, and this all stemmed from a welfare call that a neighbor made because he noticed that her front door was open. And I think he noticed it somewhere around midnight, maybe a little bit later than that.
Yeah, and the police came around. I think the whole thing, because I thought it was around 2:00 they came, until 2:30.
So the police get a welfare call, and apparently the neighbor, in subsequent interviews after this all happened, he made it very clear that, he intended to actually, receive the police when they were there and basically instruct them like, hey, this is what I think is going on. But it happened so quickly. So the police got there on the scene, and according to reports, they, obviously noticed that, the front door was open as well. And there was one officer in particular who fired shots into Mr. Jefferson's home, and the reports are that his thinking was that possibly she may have had a weapon or something to that extent. I don't know. Yeah. That hasn't been confirmed, I know. But that's the story that was coming out immediately after the incident occurred. Well, go ahead. Well, I know you want to say something about that.
But they also mentioned, I think that, I want to say the nephew, but there was mentioned that, hey, essentially, door open, right? They came in, they went to the side.
Yeah.
Atatiana Jefferson, and she's like, at 2 a.m, like, I hear noise. Let me grab my gun, right? Goes check the side of the window. The officer sees her with the gun, or reportedly you see her with a gun, right?
Right. Yeah.
But according to the video, he never said.
Police is Fort Worth police.
He never identified himself as Fort Worth police,
and he just fired shots.
So she's pointing gun. She's a resident. I mean, she's a resident at home. Like, what's going on, right? And he's outside. Like, oh, wait a minute, I see a threat. So you didn't announce. You saying, hey, please put your hands down, and then pow, pow, you shoot her. So how did she escape that? Like, I don't see how, like, was a very unfortunate situation. I felt like this could have gone down so many ways. Remember, this got bad enough where afterwards, even the chief of police at the time was saying, hey, if he didn't resign, he was going to terminate him. I mean, he clearly made some egregious mistakes. And this was a quick, they didn't waste no time. You're gone, and like I said, now he's got indicted for murder, and trial after you wait for years now. Trial's supposed to happen was in November.
It's gonna happen November 16th is when the trial will start.
But that case is just so devastating here at this time. Just being in Fort Worth, thinking at that time, somebody so young. I think she was 28.
28 years old.
28 years old. Life ahead of her. I think the mom was in the hospital too because she had an 8-year-old nephew in the home. Imagine it was an 8-year-old nephew who decided to go check the window. He could have been killed. Mm-hmm. She went to go check, not knowing, what's going on. I mean, technically castle doctrine, right? And for those, you can go dive into what castle doctrine is, but she has a right to protect their home and her surroundings.
Absolutely.
She legally can carry that the firearm, and she was checking on what's going on. And the police, and the video shows the police never really identified them. The officer never identified himself as a cop,
right?
And there's so many other ways it could have been handled. And so, we're just talking about this case because it's not only this case that troubles us. It's just the history of all these different cases of other. Clearly police misconduct or unjustified police killings of our black folks. And so, I mean, And like I said, what do you expect for this trial? I mean,
well, the state is going to, be charged with proven murder, so the elements of murder have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. I think the defense is going to be that the officer, when he saw the silhouette in the window of, a person with a weapon, he just reacted, and so that was the reason why he just fired shots in immediately without thinking. And that will essentially be what their defense, comes down to the fact that she was armed. But I think there's something important here that even if you feel like, you're of the other opinion, you're like, oh, well, she had a gun, blah, 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 because you have people that will say that, well, she had a gun, so what is he supposed to do? He feared for his life. The fact that, and I think this is pretty evident, very, very clear on the video, the fact that the moment he speaks, he literally fires shots.
It's
the
crazy.
Exact moment, the immediacy of the shots that were fired, it suggests that he had already sort of made up his mind to shoot first, right? And that goes back to our conversation, our wider conversation about, our police officers, as they are currently trained and, in how police departments are currently organized. Is that the best way to deal with, these type of welfare calls or just interactions that they, where we need some type of law enforcement, personnel on the scene of an incident? Are they really the best people to handle it? Because police are trained to come in and neutralize the threat. That is the reality. They're not trained to be social workers. They're not trained to be psychologists or what have you. That doesn't absolve them or him of guilt in this case. But I do think that we have to understand the psychology behind police officers and their thinking when they are going into unknown circumstances. And so it's easy to point the finger and blame police, which I think in this case it is very
No, in this
clear.
case, former chief of police coming out saying...
I think so. What I'm saying is that there's a larger issue at play here, and it goes to the defunding police issue. But I know we're going to get into that later, so I'm going to let us continue to talk about some of these other police killings.
Yeah. And this is just a reminder: we know, like, Atatiana Jefferson, Ms. Jefferson represents one of many other cases, that we have, has impacted the nation. It's impacted Black folks. It's messed up our psyche and emotions. And everybody deals with death differently or process watching death, especially on video, especially unjust murders. Right. And so, this is a reminder, for people who forgot, all these other different cases we're talking about. I mean, police misconduct. I'm talking about like Breonna Taylor, back in 2020, last year, what happened? Based on police come in with a no-knock warrant.
Should be outlawed, in my opinion. I don't know why there's such thing as a no-knock warrant. Come in on no-knock warrant. Her boyfriend didn't know what's going on, fired a shot, and they just started shooting left and right, and because they suspected drugs, and there was questions about the no knock warrant because they didn't. It seemed like I think according to reports they were not truly truthful in their attempts to even get the no knock warrant in the first place. So there's a whole set of issues there, and so you're talking about a woman, Black sister, lost because of that, which led to the whole Say Her Name campaign. You think about Laquan McDonald. And I think that was in Chicago, how he essentially got shot 16 times while walking away from police with a, they say with a knife, or that's what the report saying. But he got shot 16 times, and then all that, you got an inspector general in Chicago said, hey, there were they felt like up to 16 officers would help covering up, and that took a while to get that to find true justice. And we can talk about George. We're talking about George Floyd. Everyone remember George Floyd last year, how officer sat on his neck for more than 8 minutes, or Jordan Edwards. We're talking about outside of Dallas, Ball Springs, how he was in this, police was going to go and check a party or hear some disturbances, and he's riding his car leaving. An officer shot him in the back of the head. I think he was 15 years old. We call him Mike Brown. I mean, just for people not to remember, Mike Brown and Ferguson. Remember that started the whole Ferguson rioting and everything going on because the way that went down. You had an officer telling him he should get off the street, go on the sidewalk, then pretty much put his car in front of him,
There's an altercation. He shoot 2 times. Mike Brown's trying to run. He shoots him, and then Mike's trying to run. Mike Brown turns around. There's been different reports, conflicting reports. That lots of people believe he said, "Don't shoot me," but officers shot him. So there's different reports on that, on conflicting reports on that. But another brother, and which really pushed the Black Lives Matter further. But there's so many cases. You guys, for people who don't remember, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile. We're talking about, Tamir Rice. He's 12-year-old, died with a toy gun, playing with a toy gun outside. All these cases. And here's the thing, when I think about all these cases, it can easily mess up our psyche. And this should not be a black issue. This should be a human rights issue. And I want to be careful because people want to look at this and say, all I'm going after is police. There are a lot of great police officers. But we as a community, which includes the good police officers, have to have to fight and stand up for what's wrong. And have to for what's right. Stand up for let me make sure. Stand up for what's right. Let me make that clear. Stand up for what's right. But really call out egregious behavior. Call out injustice, any injustice going on. And so all these cases leads to me asking the question, with all these cases going on, and remember, we're not even talking about cases or stories of people who are not recorded, of incidents of people not recorded every single, who are not recorded, who are not seen, who got killed by a police officer for no unjustified reason. And we don't even get a chance to hear their story or know their name. And so, Jeremy, what are some steps that need to be taken as far as police accountability?
So before we get there, I want to circle back to some of this stuff because police accountability, I think definitely there needs to be a move to sort of remove the veil and the secrecy of how police investigations take place. We know that internal affairs is the launch pad for a lot of these investigations when they first, come to the attention of the police, whether it's they've killed someone or an individual is just, seriously injured from an interaction with police, right? But here's the question I think we have to even ask ourselves before we get to the internal investigations part, right? Do we think that there is a problem that is systemic here? In other words, we're looking at a problem that is throughout the system, complete and wholly. It's a cancer that's spread throughout police departments all around the nation, and they have a problem with how they police, in particular, black men and women. Or are these just isolated incidents? Because I think what we prescribe for the solution, the prescription that we, determine is proper is going to be different depending on how we look at this issue. So I have my thoughts. I think it's system-wide. I'm going to just go ahead and say that, but I'm curious what you think about it.
I think it's system-wide. I do think a lot of it's system-wide because, and you can talk about some of the history of police and the system and law enforcement and the impacts that law enforcement has had in terms of people of color. And so I think the system thing, because like I said, it's the mentality. But part of it is, you're supposed to be part of the community. You're supposed to protect and serve. Not the privileged, not people who are privileged, not the wealthy and just affluent people, everyone. And so when you already have a history of police misconduct when it comes to dealing with black folks for decades, 100 plus years, and some form of law enforcement has been going after black folks for more than 100 years, and you have the system in place and some form of that system here together. We're not even talking about federal, like in terms of FBI and the steps that J. Edgar Hoover took. You know what I mean? Like, we don't want to go those next levels, but there's always been some form of police, or police going after Fred Hampton. Like, look him up. There's always something that has a history. And then even though the system's been modified, and now you have more black officers and stuff like that, it still doesn't change the fact that the system's in place. And there's still issues that need to be, that's some underlining issues that need to be, that needs to be addressed. And I think part of it for me is the fact that it's the fact that, like I said, it's police officers and police unions
that's another part of it too.
Have to call out what's wrong. Now, there may be some cases where you got to wait a little bit, but cases that are clearly, you look on tape and like they violated protocol. They violated our standard police procedures. It is flat out wrong. Call it out. Don't be sitting here like we're going to defend, or some cases we may cover up, or we're gonna. And then people don't also talk about, Jeremy. Depends on every city has their own police procedures. Some police procedures says, you know what? If there's an incident of this nature, officer has up to 24 hours or maybe 40 hours to make up their own, put their own story together. So they can come home, they can chill. Rather than giving a story up front as soon as the incident happened, they can wait up to 24 or even 40 hours before come back with a story. Some procedures there are some procedures in place that states that.
So yeah, I mean, and everything you said, again, totally. I mean, I agree with it completely. But I think, you said something that I think we have to sort of peel the layers back. So you said, police unions and police departments need to point out when something is wrong, right? And the more important question that I see is, why don't they do that, right? Because we all know it, right? You see a police, we see the body camera footage or the dash camera footage, and we see what happened. And it's kind of clear to most of us, you look at George Floyd or whatever, why there isn't more widespread, support to say, hey, you know what, this is wrong, this shouldn't be done. Because you see it in pockets, right? You see certain police officers
you see some pockets. Yeah.
You see certain police departments maybe that are, more progressive or more, trying to really, change. But at large, as a unified body, I don't really think you see that.
No.
And so you have to ask yourself why, right? And I think we have to take it back to how policing really started in this country, right? You talk about in the 1860s when you had these, or even before that, really, you had slave patrols.
Yep.
And this was sort of really the first time that you had a group or a body that was enforcing a law against another group, wholesale in this country. And so, from that context or from that is where a lot of our police forces were literally born out of, right? And then you can fast forward even to
some from the Ku Klux Klan.
Absolutely,
we could add some of those elements too. Yeah,
you can fast forward to the 80s and the 90s when there was the whole war on drugs, and drugs was a huge problem, and there was significant studies that have been done by, I think, the Brennan Center. I think the I can't think of this. It's an institute, the Kerner Commission, talking about police misconduct and how it was widespread in a lot of major metropolitan areas. Netflix has a good documentary about the Sean Ellis case and how Sean Ellis was a kid who just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Until this day, when the district attorney finally decided to drop the charges against him, their official stance was, we're dropping the charges against Sean Ellis, not because he's innocent, not because he didn't commit this crime, but we just don't have enough evidence to prosecute. The case is so old. So to them, they still, in the eyes of the police department, they still view him as a murderer, right? So knowing all of that information, how do you really effectively challenge a police force? How do you hold them accountable, knowing this history, knowing their psychology, and knowing what, ultimately black men and black women will be up against when you get pulled over? It's late at night. You don't have the benefit of having an attorney right there. You don't have the benefit of having, Black Lives Matter protesters behind you. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So that's where I'm coming from with it. What do we give black people in the incident when you're actually, behind enemy lines, so to speak? And that's what I think is really a relevant part of the conversation.
No, it is. And I think it's complicated. I mean, you got to hope that, some people say, your mama will say, hey, just do what you can to get home.
Yeah.
But even then, there's no guarantee that, that means you can get home. You just, one of those things, you pray and hope. If you you have a chance to move, to able to live past this incident, document it, file your complaint, go take it up to higher levels, making sure that there's proper adjudication process. And then, like I said, really use your elected officials to empower and push for change. But it's hard. It's hard. And I think the other thing too is part of it is also a need for, in some cases, some type of police oversight board, a community oversight board, independent
agency,
with subpoena power too. Because all this advisory, I want to take a look, with some subpoena power too, potentially, enforcement power. Like, I want to look into your procedures.
Yeah, I totally agree.
If there's certain cases, I want to look at some, certain files. Now, we know that a community oversight board can't get privy to everything, but they have a right to. They need to have some level of enforcement, some level of subpoena power. And I know that makes people jealous because some people in police are like, well, why not let them do their jobs? But the reality is, there's oversight no matter where you go. In your job, there's oversight. No matter what type of job you have oversight. Even the president of the United States has oversight. Okay, so I don't want to hear, well, police officers, what is putting too much oversight, too much burden. No, that's just life. I mean, every job, everything you do, you have there's some sense of oversight. And so, like I said, that's going to be one big thing. Is pushing for a community oversight board with some subpoena power, with some enforcement power to really get some changes done. Really making sure that you're, looking through some of those procedures, making sure procedures are getting done. Looking at rules like A can't wait rules. Check out A can't wait website. They have, 8 major things that felt like they should be changed, across nationwide. Like, whether it's like banning chokeholds and require the escalation process, use of force continuum, stuff like that. So those are some of the things. But you know what? We come back from break. Let's dive into defund the police.
Oh man,
because I want to see your thoughts. People have an idea what defund the police is, and really it's up to different people what their thoughts are. But we're gonna talk about what is really defund the police? What does it mean? And are we for it? Jim, are you for it? We're about to find out. Are you for it? Or whatever version of defund the police. So we're gonna dive into that. We'll all come back. Please stay tuned. We'll be back on a Shot of E&J podcast.